The death toll from rains in Brazil rises to 36, as the governor of Sao Paulo reports that the army has been deployed to rescue the victims and the injured. Social movements in the northern regions of Peru start a 48-hour strike against Dina Boluarte and the Congress. And also, the President of the United States, Joe Biden, arrived on an unannounced visit to the capital of Ukraine. From the headquarters of TeleSUR English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South. I'm your anchor, Gladys Quesada. And now we begin with the news. At least 36 people have been killed after heavy rain caused flooding and landslides in Brazil's Sao Paulo state. Rescue workers continue to search for victims, reconnecting isolated communities and clearing blocked roads that trapped an unknown number of tourists who traveled to attend carnival celebrations. Sao Paulo state government said in a statement that 35 people died in the city of São Sebastián, and a 7-year-old girl was killed in neighboring Ubatuba. Weather forecasts show heavy rains will continue in Sao Paulo's coastal area, challenging civil defense and fire department rescue teams and raising the prospect of a higher death toll. Peruvian authorities reported that over 800 people lost their homes as a result of the heavy rains affecting the country. The National Emergency Department, the ZEN, reported that despite the material damage, no human losses have been reported in the areas affected by the floods. The agency explained that rescue and assistance teams are working in coordination with local authorities to deal with the situation. Meanwhile, other groups deployed in trucks loaded with food and humanitarian aid are assisting people affected. The heavy rains started on Thursday, February 16th in the department of Amambay, resulted in the overflowing of large rivers affecting the main roads and the buildings in the region. In Chile, a reactivation of forest fires is reported in the regions of Biobío and Araucanía in southern part of the country. Chile's Minister of the Interior, Carolina Toja, informed that a total of 256 forest fires have been reported in the country, of which 151 are under control and 67 are still being fought by firefighters and military. According to the high official of Chile's government, the fire has reached worrying proportions in several communities and populated areas of the Araucanía region. Meanwhile, the Biobío region, the fires developed much more severely than expected. According to official reports based on evaluations made by the National Forestry Corporation, around 25% of the fires registered this year have been intentional, something that in the last 2 weeks has left 25 people dead and over 400,000 hectares burned throughout the South American country. Now we move on to other topics. In Peru, the provinces of San Martín, Piura, Trujillo, and Lambayeque in the north of the country have begun a 48-hour strike in protest against the government of Dina Boluarte. Various organizations have joined the initiative, which has been preceded by occupations, mobilizations, strikes, and blockades throughout the north of the country. In addition to the claims against the executive, they repudiate what they qualify as obscure management of the legislature, where the possibility of calling elections has been blocked on repeated occasions. In the region of Arequipa, alongside two indigenous, farmers, students, and unions, the reserve will join the march in rejection of impunity. On Saturday, Mexican President Andrés Manuel López Obrador signed a decree nationalizing lithium, a strategic mineral for the development of new technologies. This measure is complementary to a reform approved in April 2022 that considers lithium as the nation's property. According to the Energy Secretariat, lithium has been detected in only 23 countries, and it is estimated that Mexico is in 10th place in terms of reserves. The Mexican government has invited lithium-producing countries and companies to participate in the Sonora Plan, among them the electric car manufacturer Tesla, which is expected to install a plant in Mexico. In Ecuador, President Guillermo Lasso failed to attend the second parliament summons about Caso Encuentro. The parliamentary commission investigating the alleged corruption network in public companies and links with drug trafficking groups summoned the president after he had failed attending the previous appearance. Since he is recovering from surgery, the president was supposed to do this via video conference. The parliamentary commission was to deliver the report with its conclusions on February 22nd. Due to the delay, however, legislators agreed to request an extension given new evidence of illicit campaign funding between the government and drug trafficking cartels. Should the extension be approved, the report will be delivered on Saturday, March the 4th. In Colombia, festivities around the carnivals of Barranquilla begin. The celebrations, which will last for 4 days, started on Saturday, February 18th. The customary Queen Parade, folkloric comparsas, and traditional dances will take place during these events. The Carnival is the most important folkloric and cultural festival in the country since it gathers emblematic memory and identity expressions of the people from Barranquilla, the Colombian Caribbean, and the great river La Magdalena. In 2001, the Colombian Congress proclaimed this carnival as cultural heritage of the nation, and in 2003, UNESCO recognized it to be a masterpiece of the oral and intangible heritage of humanity. And the famous carnival returned to Brazil's largest city, Sao Paulo, attracting crowds of domestic and foreign tourists. This is the first time the event has returned to its traditional date since the outbreak of COVID-19 in 2020. It was last held in April 2022. This year's float designs highlight cultural diversity with elements of African folklore, classics of European culture, and local Brazilian culture. And some of Brazil's best samba schools performed in Friday night's parade. The federal government expects some 46 million to participate in the annual celebration, and for the festivities to raise some $1.58 billion, up 26.9% from last year, according to an estimate by Brazil's National Confederation of Trade in Goods, Services and Service Provisions. Let's take a short break, but first, remember you can follow us on our TikTok account at TeleSUR English, in which you will be able to see news in different formats, news updates and more. Other stories coming up, stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. United States President Joe Biden arrived on Monday in the Ukrainian capital of Kyiv on an unannounced visit. Ukraine's media showed the picture of the head of the White House in the monastery of St. Michael of the Golden Domes. Minutes later, President Zelensky reported on the arrival of the president, who was astonished that 1 year after the war, Ukraine is still standing. The president's agenda is kept under reserve. He was at the government headquarters, where he reaffirmed his commitment to the Ukrainian peer, to whom he will deliver $500 million of additional aid. Although there was no shelling upon Biden's arrival, all the country's sirens were activated. And the Russian Investigative Committee is looking into the United States citizens and some officials of the Ukrainian Defense Ministry in connection with their involvement in the creation of biological weapons on Ukrainian territory. According to Investigative Committee Chief Alexander Bastrinkin, the ministry continued to gather and document evidence of Kyiv's violation of the Convention on the Prohibition of the Development, Production and Stockpiling of Bacteriological and Toxin Weapons, and on their destruction. He also said that at present, more than 10 U.S. citizens, as well as a number of Ukrainian Defense Ministry officials, are under investigation for their involvement in double-purpose biological programs. The European Union's High Commissioner for Foreign Affairs, Josep Borrell, called on Sunday to speed up and increase military assistance to Ukraine. In a speech at the 59th Security Conference in Munich, Borrell considered that Ukraine is a member of the European family and urged the need to speed up military aid to this country. In this sense, he condemned that certain countries of the bloc show skepticism towards the support to Kiev and called on these countries to behave in accordance with the universal values they defend. The High Commissioner was also in favor of Ukraine's entry into the European Union. However, he recalled that this will require changes both in the European Union and in Ukraine, which will have to make reforms in order to meet the criteria. China's government warned the United States of the consequences of its insistence on exaggerating and taking advantage of the accidental entry of the scientific balloon into its airspace. During his meeting with the U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken at the 59th Munich Security Conference, the Director of Foreign Affairs of the Central Committee of the Communist Party, Wang Yi, called on Washington not to take advantage of the situation to promote an escalation of tensions, and warned if it does not, it will have to bear the consequences of Beijing's response. Wang Yi reaffirmed the position on the accidental nature of the event and criticized the U.S. abuse of force, who shot down the Chinese aerostatic plane, saying it was part of an espionage program. In that sense, Wang Yi upheld that Washington has no moral standing to discredit China because U.S. balloons have flown multiple times over China's airspace. Turkey concluded rescue efforts in all provinces except the two hardest hit by the last week's massive quake that killed tens of thousands. The nation's disaster agency head, Yunus Zeser, said search and rescue efforts continue in about 40 buildings in the provinces of Hatay and Kahramanmaraş. There had been abundant coverage of rescue teams finding survivors, but that has now slowed, with no survivors found in at least 24 hours. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan said some 2.2 million people have been evacuated or have left the affected provinces. And the total number of dead, including Syria, now stands at 44,377. The Turkish Vice President Fuat Oktay said Saturday that some 105,000 buildings collapsed and had to be demolished or were severely damaged as a result of the quake. In Syria, humanitarian aid continues to arrive in regions controlled by anti-government groups. A convoy of 14 truckloads of 1,269 tents and winter kits sent by the MSF arrived on Sunday in Syria through the Al-Haman border crossing in the airfield area. The UN announced that President Bashar al-Assad agreed to open 2 more border crossings from Turkey into northwestern Syria to allow in aid. An Andalus news agency posted videos of toys left behind in rubble after 2 powerful earthquakes in southern Turkey that killed thousands of people.
On Monday, February 6, millions of people were sleeping peacefully in their homes. It was 4:17 a.m. when the first earthquake struck southeastern Turkey and northern Syria. It was magnitude 7.8 on the Richter scale. Only 9 hours after the first earthquake, whose epicenter was very close to the city of Gaziantep, there was an aftershock of magnitude 7.5 of abnormal intensity. From that moment on, the nightmare began for many. Desperation, confusion, and cries for help. The images shocked the world. Entire buildings collapsed, taking thousands of souls who were buried under the rubble. Immediately, the expressions of solidarity began. Hundreds of countries offered help by sending rescuers, food, and medical teams. 13 days have passed, and in the destroyed cities there is still chaos and uncertainty about what is to come. There are still people missing, entire families are still under the rubble, and there is still hope of finding some alive.
And we have more news coming up after a final short break, so stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. The African Union insists it has a zero-tolerance policy towards unconstitutional change as it maintains its suspension of 4 military-ruled countries, Burkina Faso, Guinea, Mali, and Sudan. Burkina Faso, Guinea, Mali, and Sudan, states located in the Sahel region, were sanctioned by the Pan-African body following coups in recent years. But the African Union said on Sunday it was ready to help them restore democracy. ECOWAS has also decided to impose travel bans on government officials and senior leaders of those countries. The Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS, also said it was maintaining sanctions on the 3 Sahel countries. West African leaders meet on the sidelines of the AU summit to review measures and discuss progress in restoring civilian rule in the 3 states. And the Kenyan President William Ruto called on Sunday for rich countries to be held accountable for driving global warming and for revamp of international financial institutions to better fight climate change. Ethiopian capital Addis Ababa, where climate change is a major topic, Ruto said the time was ripe for a paradigm shift.
At a place where we have no options, climate change is a daily reality in many parts of the world. And it is not getting better, it is getting worse unless something gives way, unless we have a honest conversation. We haven't made our voice clear. We haven't spoken about this with clarity. We haven't spoken about this loud enough. Continuing the impunity of turning on fossil fuels, turning on coal, as is happening today, puts the whole globe at risk.
In Sudan, citizens demand the national government to intervene and impose market controls to protect the population from traders who indiscriminately impose high prices on basic goods. The population made the appeal to government authorities after concerns about the multiple crises affecting the country. Citizens denounce that prices in the markets are not regulated and that each trader sells at convenience prices, affecting the purchasing power of the population. Therefore, they stress the urgent need of controlling markets and prices to protect citizens from the greed of the Sudanese traders. In turn, some economists consider that this issue could negatively affect the national economy.
Prices are not regulated in the market, and everyone sells what is convenient for them. There is no control over the market or prices, no control to protect the citizen from the greed of traders.
If we look at the inflation and reports, we see that the equation is dysfunctional and that this issue could negatively affect the economy at its next stage.
In Afghanistan, the Taliban government assured it will further the plans to turn former foreign military bases into special economic zones. The Ministry of Commerce currently works on a plan for Afghan companies to collaborate in the creation of the economic zones in the country. According to officials, authorities will submit this proposal to the country's Economic Committee and the Cabinet for approval. Likewise, they also announced the launch of a pilot to promote the special zones in the capital Kabul and the province of Balkh. The Taliban took over the country's government in 2021 when foreign forces left the nation after 20 years of occupation, leaving behind a war-torn economy. And the front-runners in Nigeria's presidential race hit the campaign trail on Saturday in a major push to convince voters a week before the polls. More than 90 million people are registered to vote in Nigeria, where President Muhammadu Buhari is stepping down after his 2 terms allowed by the Constitution. The ruling All Progressives Congress APC candidate Bola Tinubu paraded through the streets of Maiduguri in northeastern Borno State. Several hundred supporters ran alongside the convoy as they made their way to El Kanemi Sports Center, where more people with flags and placards gathered to listen to the candidate's speech. In nearby Adamawa State, from the city of Yola, the main opposition candidate Atiku Abubakar of the People's Democratic Party, the PDP, also held a proselytist act. And we have come to the end of this news brief. But remember, you can find this and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also, if you feel so inclined, please join us on social media for all the latest news. We are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Telegram, and TikTok. For TeleSUR English, I'm your anchor, Gladys Quesada. Thank you for watching.